like what we've seen just yesterday, right? We had 20 million transactions in one day. I don't think there's no other proof of work chain that comes close to that. If we had 20 million transactions on Ethereum, we'd be breaking it. Like BTC can't obviously do it. Like 600,000 its max, so it can't ever do it. Ethereum, if they ever, I'm not even sure what their actual limitation is, but if they even got close to that or started spiking up, we would see very expensive transaction fees. And so this number is absurd in the sense that what you're seeing comparatively. And so it becomes deafening to a point where it's like, if we get to like 50 million or 100 million, like what am I seeking when it's just literally in my face, right? And I think it goes back to the marketing of like, look at what's happening. Like, because if no one knows that 20 million happened yesterday, then no one's going to care, right? But if we are vocal in the sense that, hey, we hit 50 million transactions yesterday versus your 1 million transaction chain versus your 250,000 transaction chain, what is wrong with us, right? Why are we not able to be compared or be brought into these conversations? Like, I think that it's like almost, you kind of are a bit dumbfounded as to like, why am I looking at layer 2 scaling solutions on Ethereum when I can do this? And it kind of speaks to the idea that most companies aren't really on blockchain yet, because if most companies were on it, they would be finding it, they would be seeing it. But the fact that they aren't is that it's a very, very independent and I guess small developer community. And until we get to these bigger players who are going to seek out, who are going to do the due diligence and going to have teams of people validate software stacks, I think that's when we really see BSV just fly off, because it just works.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we have Hector Lopez joining us. Hector, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Brittany. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing good, Hector. I appreciate you joining us on the show. And today I really want to focus on helping people new to Bitcoin understand what Bitcoin is, the fundamentals, and just what people should be aware of coming into Bitcoin. So with that being said, what is the most important thing in your opinion that people should be aware of when first starting or coming into the space?
Sorry. So I think the simplest way people can look at Bitcoin is the idea that Bitcoin solves the problem of us settling any disputes. So traditionally, if I were to give you $5, right, I assumed I gave you $5, and I hope you assume that I gave you $5. But then in the future, you could come back and say, hey, no, you only gave me $2. And I'm like, no, I gave you $5, right? We have this dispute, right? We have this argument back and forth. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin and what it does is basically it becomes that third party, that third accountant in the system, that when we send Bitcoin, send value, we can then both point to the transaction and be like, oh, look, you did actually send me $5 worth of Bitcoin or $5 worth of value, right? And that settles it pretty easily. And what basically allows that to happen, and there's no like basically malicious intent of manipulating the $5 value, or if it's really 3 or 2 and I can pay someone to change that, right, is the whole concept of Bitcoin. It allows people who don't necessarily have to be friendly with each other to economically agree that I did send you $5 because it's in the best interest of everyone else involved in the system, right? And so that's the simplest way you can think of Bitcoin. And I think that that's what's revolutionary, is that we have this cool new way where we can settle disputes, be it the simplest way is just sending money back and forth. And there's obviously more complicated and complex things you could do on top of that. But in a very, I guess, elementary way, that's the revolution of what Bitcoin provides.
Yeah, it's kind of like comparing it to our bank accounts, right? Like our debiting and banking accounts. Like if you have a check deposited into your account, it'll show up pending until a third party is there to verify that transaction. And so instead of having an individual verify that transaction through the banking systems, we can utilize Bitcoin in that same manner, right? So it's definitely cool. But, there's so many misconceptions between, BTC and what you and I might consider Bitcoin. So what would you say are the key fundamental differences between the two, and how would you explain them?
Without getting too into like the technical understanding, because we're trying to be like, very open and allow everyone to understand the concepts. There's obviously technical differences between BTC and Bitcoin, BSV, what we consider the ticker. And you can get into those and understand those, but that kind of loses a lot of people. So at the higher level, BTC has a limitation on the amount of transactions that can be processed per day, right? And so with 600,000 transactions per day, majority of the world isn't using it today. And the majority of the world has a lot of economic activity. And so 600,000 transactions are not enough to allow the world to use the BTC network, right? So the contrast there is BSV says, no, we're going to allow an unlimited size of transactions and let everyone in the world get onto the system and use it for whatever they want, right? We have no definition as to what is not value and what is value, right? You do what you need to do on the network. And so that's, to us, the difference between BTC and BSV, and where we believe, BSV believes that scaling, the technology can scale and shown it scaled. Like I think yesterday we hit 20 million transactions in one day versus 250,000 transactions on BTC versus 1.2 million on Ethereum, and so on and so forth, right? No one's even close to the volume size, right? And so all that's at a cost of like 0.001 cents versus $8 on Ethereum versus $2 on BTC, right? And those go exponentially up as soon as the network gets congested with any new project or any new traffic. So BSV showing that this is possible. This is not theoretical. We're doing it today, right? And we can send money just as fast as BTC on to Venezuela or to Colombia or India or whatever, right? We can do everything BTC wants to do on different networks like Lightning. We can do it all on layer one. We can do it all today. We all have all the exact same properties that people tout on BTC. We have the possibility of immutability, right? Of sending value and not expecting it to be reversed, right? We have the idea that there are only 21 million, right? If that's what you're into, like that, all the properties are the exact same. The only thing that's different is this limitation that people feel is the right way to go, but there's not really a good proposition for it. And in reality, over time, it kind of kills the network itself, because right now, BTC makes about $500,000 on per day on transaction fees, right? So 250,000 transactions make $500,000 per day, but the network is generating $40 million in value. And so $40 million is what's costing the network to use to basically have all those miners do what they do, right? All those miners to do the work. And so that problem means that there's a 97% reliance on that miner reward, and only 4% is actually covering with transaction fees. So if your network can only hit 600,000 and you're already at 250,000, making only $500,000 a day, you're in a bad situation, right? So I think that's a very critical issue that BTC has to address, and I'm just not sure how they're going to get there.
Yeah, well, there's also a lot of like misinformation about the differences between BTC and BSV, right? And I guess we could touch on that a little bit, but I also just want to very quickly say, how would you respond to somebody if they came up to you and asked you, okay, well, should I be investing, key term here, in BTC or BSV or some other currency in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah. So I'd say in that sense, these cryptocurrencies are not investments, right? They're highly speculative plays that people do to gain more actual USD value. And the majority, there might be people who actually believe in this, like, right? They say Ethereum is the future, BTC is the future, right? And they have those actual beliefs. But in reality, everyone is trying to validate themselves with more influx of fiat money to come in, right? Otherwise, they could buy it all super cheap and be super happy, right? But what they want is their actual value to go up in USD terms, so they can buy more things in the real world, not buy PFPs and fun virtual items. So what I'm saying is the contrast there with BSV is you have a scalable blockchain that charges 0.001 per transaction today, which arguably goes down over time as more people use it. So if that's the theory, if that's the actual idea and that's what actually works today, then you have this theory where you say, okay, how can companies and people utilize the blockchain, and this blockchain in particular, to do actual business? And so we go back to the beginning where we have this third party who is able to validate what's happening, right, in real time, what things that occur, right? And so my thought is, if businesses need a blockchain to validate their business and use validation in part of their business models, which makes them have a profitable business and has them be 10 times better than whatever the current, I guess, competitor is what they're doing, and there's a lot of those businesses, then BSV is the natural choice for these people. They don't care about Ethereum being the place for NFTs or Solana being the up-and-comer of Ethereum. What they want is, at the end of the day, businesses want software, want systems or software that fixes their issues and allows them to provide a service, right? In my case, I run a software business. I don't argue back and forth which stack we should be using because I am a proponent of whatever, right? Like I'm not a proponent of Python because I love Python. I'm going to use the best technology to allow me to provide a value and a business that can beat competitors, right? So if that's the argument, and we say there's gonna be a lot of these people competing and using blockchain to basically bring an edge over incumbents in their own niches, then BSV is the natural choice for these people, right? We have yet to see another blockchain that can provide this exact same value. If there is another one, then yeah, then I think that's up to debate and say, okay, cool. We have now BSV, we have this other blockchain that does the exact same thing and very similar. Now we can compete for developers, compete for actual business. But until that point, I think BSV is a clear leader in companies who are serious about using blockchain.
Yeah, and that's often the same remarks that I make to people who ask me the same questions, right? But the next questions that they always have for me is, well, the price of BSV could go up, because if what you're saying is true, then I should invest in BSV and hopefully, sit and wait for my money to grow as well. How would you respond if you were asked a similar question?
I could see the value of BSV increasing, and it's more so because there is a limitation in the sense that the limitation is very high, but there's a limitation of throughput that can actually happen, right? And we obviously see that increase over time, but there might be businesses who need a lot of volume, and those businesses are, if their business is valuable enough and they're able to basically net profit off whatever the cost is to acquire the Bitcoin and write to the chain is better than anyone else's, they're going to try to acquire more BSV than anyone else, right? If that's the case. So it's really just, there's an argument there to be made that BSV value will go up because writing to the blockchain you need BSV to write to the blockchain. And if everyone's trying to write to the blockchain because we can scale and we can allow everyone to write, there will always be a market to be able to acquire Bitcoin to allow that process to happen, right? Because for example, if I had a widget that I was selling or a service that I was selling for $10,000 and it cost me $100 to write to the blockchain that gave me the ability to sell it at $10,000, I would acquire as much Bitcoin as I could to keep selling that $10,000 service, right? So I think that's where I'm seeing the value of BSV could rise, but ultimately, what we're trying to show people is we're not a speculative asset that you just buy and hold and pray that it goes up because you want everyone else to buy at a higher price than you did, so that you can eventually sell for real world items to make your life better, right? Because no one wants to buy BTC, Ethereum, or anything just for the value of it to go up and you can stare at it. It's because you want to buy a better car, you want to buy a nicer house, you want to buy vacations, you want to do things in your real life that affect you, right? You don't want to look at a number and have it go up, right? You're eventually going to cash that out and want to do something that affects you personally. You want to pay for your kids' college, you want to, whatever it is, right? And I think that ultimately that's the goal for everyone. So BTC sells you on this dream that it's going to go up, but there is no backing as to why it should go up, right? Just simply the fact that it should go up. And so I think we're seeing now in what are we, 12, 13 years later, that people are finally realizing the emperor has no clothes, and BTC, why am I holding this when I can just do anything? I can buy Solana last year and I would make a much greater return. I could have bought Doge last year. Like, I think Tesla just released their newest earnings, and they showed Tesla, its stock, outperformed their holdings of BTC by 4%. So Tesla could have bought their own shares by basically lowering the amount of outstanding shares, increasing the value of shareholders, instead of buying and holding BTC. They could have, inversely, because Elon's a huge Doge fan, could have bought Doge, $1.5 billion worth of Doge, and that Doge would have gone up 84% versus the loss, the decrease in value versus BTC. So it's just interesting to see that BTC is losing its own use case when the use case is now this inflation hedge asset. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, which I think is kind of weird, because the majority of the world doesn't use gold, right? Like the young people, the people who are on the internet, don't care about gold, never really bought gold. You're selling to boomers, right? And boomers, it's already hard to convince them about anything technically, right? So I think it's just a very uphill battle to think that that gold is going to, be revolutionized by BTC. I don't see that. So it's now very interesting for BTC in general to have created this huge, industry of crypto that is basically killing it and creating it's creating a competitor against itself, because it's more scalable, it's much faster, and actually provides use case. Like if we look at Ethereum, right? Ethereum is expensive, like $8, hundreds of dollars to settle some transactions. But the thing is, people actually pay for it. They actually use it. They actually do things on it, right? Even though it may be expensive and it may be not worth it in some cases, like people are buying expensive PFPs or NFTs that they are, finding value in or doing whatever they want. There is no economic activity happening on BTC. And so Ethereum is showing that people want to do things on the blockchain, right? And they can do things on the blockchain. And so, BTC is quickly losing, I think, a lot of ground that people just don't see the value in just holding something and hopefully it goes up.
Well, there's a funny question that I often get asked as well, which is, well, if something happens to BTC, isn't something going to happen to BSV as well? And I always kind of chuckle at this, but how would you respond to that?
Yeah. So everything that has happened to BSV is always like, we are the ugly duckling, right? The one that no one cares about, no one likes, the shunned project for no reason. Like, we are what people consider to be a fork of Bitcoin, right? Of BTC. That's what people label it as. And fine, if that's what you want to label it as, why aren't we in the same exchanges and same places that every other fork is, every major fork, like BCH, right? But there is a explicit target to not allow BSV to exist in all these exchanges. And that's basically what it is. Like, there's nothing else that allows you to gain value than to be on exchanges, right? That's where all the speculation occurs. If you have the greatest, most scalable, let's say, most sound money project somewhere, and there's not on an exchange, no one's going to find it, right? No one's ever going to buy it, because that's why BTC was so cheap in the very beginning, because there were no exchanges for allowing it to have a formal process of price discovery, right? And even today, the price discovery is not a very formal process. I would say it's a very broken and highly inefficient process. But then compared to this, it's still like, it's showing you that exchanges didn't exist, price was low. Exchanges existed, price went up. So if BSV were on exchanges, its price would also naturally go in the same direction. But they use this argument because they think it's not providing value, and that people would seek it out if it did provide actual value. And that's not necessarily the case, because majority of people who are buying these crypto are buying it in the form of speculation and not really caring. They buy it for narratives. They buy it because they think it's going to go up because someone said something or did something, and they're willing to sell and buy the news of what's happening. So once we actually see and companies start showing real world utility with a blockchain, BSV is the obvious clear winner today. And I think it doesn't, at that point, it won't matter. And there will be exchanges who will come up and provide value to those businesses who are willing to pay for BSV.
Well, there's also there's also a lot of questions out there right now about you know, the narrative, so to speak, with BTC and Ethereum and quote unquote upgrades. And they're like, oh, well, you know, BTC scales because of the Lightning Network, or Ethereum is working on ways to scale in the future. And so, in your opinion, why aren't these things working or competing as well against BSV? Or how do you see Ethereum competing against BSV when they eventually, if ever, come out with Ethereum 2.0?
Yeah, so Vitalik came in and I think like 2015 and said, within the next 12 months, we're going to have proof of stake, right? This is 2015. That never happened. And then again in 2017, he said, we're almost there with Plasma. Didn't happen, right? I even specifically remember looking into buying GPU miners to be able to mine Ethereum just for the sake of the value, right? And increasing the value. So, and I backed out because I assumed that this Plasma was coming soon and we were going to get proof of stake, and that didn't happen. We're in 2022. We're hoping that they migrate to, and even then, like the Ethereum Foundation is saying, for the foreseeable future on the website right now, we were going to have the Beacon project, which is this proof of stake, and Ethereum, which is the proof of work. We're going in tandem for the foreseeable future until we're able to basically move everything over, merge everything over completely. So, and even at that point, there is still expectation that they will be using layer 2 solutions. That's why Optimism and ZK rollups are things that exist today, because they know that even if like otherwise these projects would not be creating layer 2 solutions. They're creating layer 2 solutions because they know ETH 2.0 is not the end all be all. They need these solutions to still allow their ability to scale, right? And so, yeah, Ethereum's not done, and it won't be done. And even if they get to a solid place, they're going to become Solana. Solana already does what they want to do, right? Solana is the future of Ethereum, and Solana in the past 7 months has gone down like 5 times, right? I put it on my Twitter every time they've gone down, and it's kind of hilarious to see this happen constantly. And so, yes, the thing's new and whatever, but
I don't think they're going to be able to figure out a way to figure out the problem with Solana. I know there's a lot of brilliant minds working on the team, and I like the fact that they're all sitting there and they're like, okay, let's try to figure out a solution to this. But the way they achieve consensus through it as long as it continues getting too many transactions come through, they get that congestion or whatever, they're going to have to keep shutting it down over and over and over again. And I don't know of a way that they're going to be able to fix it. I know that was a little off topic, but
no, you're fine. Yeah, and I agree. Like they're constantly having to shut down because they keep hitting these walls, right? And so why would, like, that's cool and fine. I understand you're testing and you're working through these problems, but if I'm a business, I don't want to deal with you if that's the case. If I know that I'm going to use a provider that's going to be down when I hit it too hard, I won't use you, right? Because it's going to hurt my business. So if that's the case, I'm going to find a solution or build a solution if I have to, that's going to give me what I want and give me the blockchain that I'm looking for, right? And so until Solana is a contender that cannot be shut down by a quote unquote DDoS attack of too many transactions, then it's not worth it, right? From a business perspective, it's not worth it. And so when we look at like BTC, for example, and their scaling solutions with Lightning, it all comes back down to the main chain, because for everyone to get onto Lightning, you still have to pass through those 600,000 transaction max capacity, right? So even if you say, hey, yeah, we got Lightning, right? For example, the country of India, if everyone in India said, we want to get on Lightning tomorrow, right? That's 1 billion people divided by 350,000. That's almost 8 years of just Lightning transactions to onboard to get people from the main chain to Lightning, right? So 8 years from now, we'll have India on Lightning. And even then, when you have people on Lightning, you now basically, just because you get on Lightning does not mean you all of a sudden have this ability to transact freely and do whatever you want. You must connect to someone who has enough liquidity for you to be able to move through. So if, for example, me and you join Lightning tomorrow, we can't enjoy the benefits of super cheap transactions because we only have a channel between me and you. I can only send money to you because I'm not connected to anyone and you're not connected to anyone. So what's the point if I can't send value everywhere? So I must connect to someone who has a lot of money, who's connected to a lot of people on that network, right? And so who has the most money, who has the most resources? Rich people, institutions, right? So you're basically recreating what we have today, which is the banking system, where I go to a bank, I have an account, and I send my money through them. They have an account with someone else. They wire money, they send the money over, right? And they basically check and balance everyone else, right? So that's how the system works today. We're basically recreating it on a layer 2 secondary system that takes years to get onto, and then you basically have to front load your money, and which most people also don't do. You don't budget your future. The majority of people don't budget their future in advance to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to spend $500 a month on car services. I'm going to put a channel up for car services, right? So it's just a very backwards thinking solution, in my opinion. And technically speaking, it's also broken in the fact that if you do have a million people or a billion people using this network, right, there's no blockchain, right? So now, if there's no blockchain, how do I know how do I know, or my node knows to send you value, right? Like, yeah, I have your invoice, but how does it actually do that, right? And the simplest way to think of it is my node needs to find a path, needs to find a route on this network of people or nodes to say, hey, I can find you the cheapest route to send $1 to Brittany. Okay, thank you. Let's figure that out. And if there's a lot of nodes and a lot of people moving value back and forth, that is a very intensive computer process for the node to handle. And so finally, when it's done figuring out the millions of nodes that exist, and say, okay, cool, we know if we found the path, Hector. Okay, let's go. We go, and then boom, someone broke our path because someone else took up one of our spots in one of the hops there. Now we're broken. We got to start over. Restart the whole thing. And so, yeah, Lightning is just a thing that will its own success, just like BTC will break if it does ever gain any adoption.
Well, I know one of the things that a lot of BTC maxis will say, well, you need to be able to run your own node, and you can't do that in BSV. So how would you respond how do you typically respond to that answer or question?
Yeah, so you're fine. So what the funny thing is about this is that they assume that BTC, when you run your own node, you are actually doing something, right? If I have a copy of the blockchain, that's great. But first of all, I honestly don't care about everyone else's transactions because they're not pertinent to my life, right? I don't care that someone sent $100 to some weird address. I care that my value is there and it exists there. And if I believe in SHA-256, right, then I believe that I can send value, right? And that the transaction that I created is not breaking, right? So if that's the case and that's how it works, then I don't need to run my own node, right? I can expect that the whole purpose of Bitcoin, which is what we have, is this expectation that there's people who might not like each other, but due to economic reasons are willing to agree to what the truth is of what's happening. That is what I'm believing in, right? That's the belief in Bitcoin. And so I don't need to run my own node to solidify that belief. That system is, I'm already in the system. I'm already owning the token to believe that. And so, even the people who actually hold their nodes, their argument is saying, well, I can always validate everything that's happening. I can always reject things that I don't agree with. Yeah, you could, but you can't do anything about it. If tomorrow all miners said, we are going to have, we're going to have a 2 megabyte block, right? And all miners agreed, and you said no. Well, that's great. You said no, but all the miners said yes. So the chain will continue to grow and add more transactions, but it won't matter to you. And the funny, ironic thing is that if you ran a legacy node before SegWit, and this is a little technical, but SegWit was a change in the BTC protocol, right? And so if you ran a node before that, or a miner before that, you basically were seeing transactions happening. You would validate them and you put them into a block and you gain rewards and do your thing. When SegWit was introduced, this created SegWit transactions. And so if you were a legacy miner and you started seeing these legacy transactions, you would see them as incomplete or I guess an issue with these transactions. So therefore you can't really validate them, right? So then you're basically losing money, but you're over here adhering to your traditional, to your purest view and saying, no, I don't believe in changes on the Bitcoin protocol. I believe I have the right Bitcoin protocol, but I'm now losing value to miners who decided to upgrade. So it kind of goes against their whole ideology of like, we can do whatever, we can control the network by running our own nodes. Yeah, you can run your own miner back in 2013 and you are now losing value compared to people who chose to upgrade. So what's really showing is miners are the ones who write to the chain, and everyone else in a very like a very general term, like has a belief that these people are acting honestly because they're incentivized economically to do so. And that's the whole point of Bitcoin, right? If you don't believe in that, then you don't believe in Bitcoin. You believe in this crazy, weird social idea that we must collectively beat the miners and tell them what to do. And that's not what the white paper says. So that's why it's kind of interesting that they hold this value so like dearly.
Yeah, definitely. Because one of the things that I usually get hit with the response after answering similarly to you is, well, you still need to be able to run your own nodes. So if I'm running a business, I want to be able to verify those transactions. If I'm buying a house from you or and you're paying me in BTC, I want to be able to verify that transaction myself. And I'm like, but why is that important? Because you don't trust the other miners, or?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, you could, as a business, you could run your own node. You could always, validate yourself. Like there are like block explorers, for example, right? Their business is to provide people the ability to scan the blockchain, right? So they must run a node and be able to say, hey, yeah, this is existing, this is happening, right? But there's an economic incentive and a reason and a business model behind why they spend resources to provide you with that information, right? No one's a philanthropist in the end. Everyone's trying to make money, right? If you're a philanthropist, then yeah, you just think that this is a great way of use of your money and you want to, provide value to the world for free. But the majority of people are looking for business, and in blockchain, it's really no different. So if you feel that your business requires a node because XYZ reason, then run a node, right? But in the general term, or the general sense, like if you're going to buy a house, you don't need to run a node. You can buy a house and expect that these people who've spent millions of dollars, who have lots of infrastructure, who have lots of people who are basically hoping that the transactions are increasing every day, that their revenues are increasing every day, that you believe them, that they will process your transaction, process it, I guess, correctly is, I guess, what people in BTC are expecting. Then yeah, you don't need to run a node. These people are obviously more incentivized than your house or whatever you're buying. Like no one's gonna try to, I guess, screw you over. I'm not even sure how they can be screwed over because Bitcoin doesn't really allow it. But that's the belief that these people have, and that's why they run their own nodes. But in general, like these guys are fully incentivized because of the Bitcoin system to validate transactions and to make sure that they're honest in what they're doing.
And so gosh, I have two questions that came to mind there. One being, their next question might be, well, how are they incentivized? What is the incentivization to verify transactions, so to speak? And then the second question that I had on my mind here, thinking from a novice type of viewpoint, is if BSV is so much greater and it's capable of scaling and it has greater utility, then why is it that we're seeing more adoption with BTC and less adoption with BSV? And those comparisons, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think like it's the adoption is just, it goes back down to distribution. Like it's very simple, the idea of distribution. When you go to the grocery store and you buy flour, right? You don't buy flour because you bought the best flour. Or even if you go online to look up the best dog food, right? You're not buying the actual best dog food in the world. You're buying the best dog food that someone has positioned themselves to be able to get that distribution channel on Google, on Amazon, or wherever you're buying, to be able to allow that to perceive you as this is the best dog food, right? And so when you go to that grocery store and you buy the flour that's there, that flour is probably not the best flour you're buying in the world. You're buying the flour that someone was able to get into that distribution channel and allow it to be bought, right? So the same thing applies here with Bitcoin, right? And BTC versus BSV. People are buying BTC because they believe that is the Bitcoin, but they don't care to actually like do the due diligence and understand and look. And the people who are providing the shelf space, Coinbase, Kraken, all these people, they're not willing to allow distribution to happen for BSV. So you can't make the fair comparison of, well, if you saw BTC flower and you saw BSV flower and said, turn the labels and like, oh, look, this one's much faster than this one, right? And make that apples to apples comparison, flower to flower comparison, then you would see, oh yeah, one is obviously greater than the other one. You don't have that option. You don't have that ability, right? And same thing happens with the grocery store, right? Like you don't look at the flower that's in the grocery store and then look online to try to find the actual best flower you can find, right? And that's really what it boils down to, is really distribution. And if distributions exist.
So I'm
Yep.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're fine.
Why is the distribution of BSV being hindered from exchanges like Kraken and Binance and so on?
So I don't honestly know why. Like we have conspiracies as to why, right? And the conspiracies are that people don't like Craig Wright, right? And Craig Wright, the reason they don't like Craig Wright is because Craig Wright says he is Satoshi Nakamoto, and people don't like that idea, don't want that idea. And kind of makes sense, right? In the sense that if BSV does everything it's supposed to do and scales unlike everything else, what is the point of buying anything else, right? And if there's no point of buying anything else, then I as an exchange, like for example, Robinhood made 50% of the revenues from crypto trading, right? And crypto trading from speculation. So everyone's speculating, trying to figure out what's going on. If everyone just bought BSV, there's not much speculation, not much buys and sells happening. Everyone's just like, oh yeah, this is the one, right? This is the thing I'm buying. It's gold. It's you don't buy different kinds of gold. You buy gold because the gold is gold, right? And so the same thing here. If you wanted to find the blockchain solution, you buy the blockchain solution that works. But we're still in this idea, this mentality that, hey, blockchain solutions are the way of the future, but we just don't know which one. We're trying to all guess, figure out, trying to do our thing to find the right one. And exchanges are glad and capable to offer you that ability to buy and sell those beliefs, right? So I think that's what it really boils down to is that could be what causes this issue of why BSV is just not friendly in that sense.
Right. And so I suppose my next question to you would be, if we're looking at BSV as this global internet payment provider service, right? Peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Then wouldn't the price of BSV need to continuously be stable in order to act as like a fiat currency on the internet? So wouldn't the making the price go up or down, being fluctuating in price, doesn't that actually hurt the narrative of Bitcoin being this electronic cash system, because it's not stable, it fluctuates?
I think that's interesting, and I think that cash is a bit subjective in the sense that cash can be anything that has value that you can basically send back and forth, right? So in the sense that like you could have like Starbucks points be cash, right? Or be value that you can send someone and they can send back. Pokemon cards can be a medium of exchange, right? In that sense that I can send you a Charizard that's worth $1 million from Jake Paul, right? And then, or Logan Paul, and I can, just do that, and that I can settle my debt that way. So I do agree that the price should be stable, right? It should be stable, but there's just so much ability to use the blockchain that there could be an argument where the price can go up and eventually stabilize, right? And so I don't know where that is. It may be now, like $80 may be the stabilization point, and this is the highest it'll ever get. And from that point forward, there's just trillions of transactions, and everyone's acquiring Bitcoin at $80 forever. Like that's fine. It doesn't matter, and you can just build services on top of that and do your thing. But I'm not sure we've had actual proper price discovery in the sense that we know what a utilized blockchain that can scale, that can be written to and solve basically the third accounting problem. What is that value versus the value it's bringing for businesses and companies and individuals, right? And I guess we need to figure out what that's going to be, because I just don't know that we we can't just say, oh yeah, today we started Bitcoin at $10 and it should always be $10, even though most of the world doesn't use it today and most businesses don't use it today, right? We need to figure out when a lot of people use it and when people are able to buy it, where is that equilibrium? Okay, we found it. Cool, let it sit there, right? And so I think that, like we've talked about with the exchanges, we just don't have that opportunity to know where that is.
Well, I wanted to go back a little bit. Earlier, you were talking about how the whole Tesla thing, and had they just invested in Doge instead of BTC, they would have made a much bigger profit. But the funny thing about Dogecoin, right, is that it was intended to be just like some funny, thing against Bitcoin at the time. And it's grown to be this, huge deal, right? In your opinion, how do we get BSV to have Doge level marketing without all the extra added steps or BS?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think first of all, like people need to get out there and talk about it, like because people talk about Doge everywhere. Like obviously, you can buy it mostly anywhere, but from my experience, like I've been a BSV supporter since probably since the very beginning. Since the very beginning, because I moved from BCH over, right? And so that idea there is, I didn't really see many people talking about it. Once we had this, like on Twitter, there was very small group of people, if any. There was one Slack channel that I found, I think like a year and a half later, 2 years ago, or like a year ago probably. And so, and then we had Clubhouse happen, and on Clubhouse, I would hardly see anyone talk about it. Then we had Twitter Spaces happen, and again, no one was talking about it. And I'm like, this is like, if a tree falls and no one's there to hear it, right? Does it make a sound, right? That's the point. You need to be vocal and have people understand that this thing exists, right? Like going back to the dog food and the flour, like if no one knows you have the best dog food, no one's going to care. No one's ever going to find out, right? You may build the best dog food ever, but if there's no one there to hear it, no one there to talk about it, you never distribute it, it's never going to sell. It's never going to do anything. And so that's what my I guess that could be the biggest issue of BSV, is the fact that there's not enough marketing and not enough happening around that to allow, I guess, conversations to be had. And that's where I take it in, like personally, in my sense, where I try to spark conversations and bring in BSV into general crypto topics when I'm on Twitter Spaces. And so, and I'm very vocal in the sense of issues with BTC, issues with Ethereum, and I bring in solutions that BSV solves. So I think that more and more people doing that allows BSV to become, I guess, more mainstream and more adopted by just the general, I guess, crypto people. But in reality, it's just that, like, I'm sure, when I first heard about Kurt, right, for example, talking about BSV, I was kind of like taken aback, like, whoa, there's someone, who has a good influence talking about it. But it kind of just didn't break the barrier when I would see it. Like it was just in the BSV sphere. Like everyone in BSV knew of Kurt, talked to Kurt, which is great, right? We need someone to cross the chasm and say, oh yeah, BSV is going to come wreck all you guys because we're the best solution, right? That's the kind of arguments you need to have with people, because they are so stuck in their belief that, and it needs to be a very polarizing statement that makes them turn their head, right, and kind of makes them wonder, like, and question what they're into. So I think taking that approach has been very successful so far, and I would love to, and we have seen it. More people talk about BSV on Twitter Spaces, on Clubhouse, and seen CoinGeek recently and Kurt get more involved with like breaking that narrative and having those, I guess, conflicts of BTC versus BSV arguments. And it's great. I think it's great for the audiences. Like there's very stout BTC proponents who say, no, we are going to take over government. We're going to do everything, do our thing. And so that's not the person you're trying to convince. You're trying to convince the audience, because the audience is the ones that are sitting there and looking like, oh yeah, this person has a point. And that's what happens all the time. Like I go into these BTC rooms and I talk to these people and I make my arguments, but after I'm done or while I'm talking, I get like 10 to 12 DMs saying, hey, I agree with you. This is great. Thanks for showing me something different, right? So that's the reward. The reward isn't for getting those individuals who are very stuck in their ways. And eventually it'll play out, and we'll see how that goes. But till then, there are a lot of people who are very new and trying to understand, and I think those are the people that are worthwhile to go after and to educate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when, in your opinion, when do you see us crossing that tipping point where we start seeing more adoption for the true Bitcoin? And how might you envision that to occur?
I think like what we've seen just yesterday, right? We had 20 million transactions in one day. I don't think there's no other proof of work chain that comes close to that. If we had 20 million transactions on Ethereum, we'd be breaking it. Like BTC can't obviously do it. Like 600,000 its max, so it can't ever do it. Ethereum, if they ever, I'm not even sure what their actual limitation is, but if they even got close to that or started spiking up, we would see very expensive transaction fees. And so this number is absurd in the sense that what you're seeing comparatively. And so it becomes deafening to a point where it's like, if we get to like 50 million or 100 million, like it's like you kind of like feel like a little bit like an idiot in the sense that like what am I seeking when it's just literally in my face, right? And I think it goes back to the marketing of like, look at what's happening. Like, because if no one knows that 20 million happened yesterday, then no one's going to care, right? But if we are vocal in the sense that, hey, we hit 50 million transactions yesterday versus your 1 million transaction chain versus your 250,000 transaction chain, what is wrong with us, right? Why are we not able to be compared or be brought into these conversations? Like, I think that it's like almost you kind of are a bit dumbfounded as to like, why am I looking at layer 2 scaling solutions on Ethereum when I can do this? And it kind of speaks to the idea that most companies aren't really on blockchain yet, because if most companies were on it, they would be finding it, they would be seeing it. But the fact that they aren't is that it's a very, very independent and I guess small developer community. And until we get to these bigger players who are going to seek out, who are going to do the due diligence and going to have teams of people validate software stacks, I think that's when we really see BSV just fly off, because it just works.
Yeah, I think you're right. And my time in Miami doing the CoinGeek BitCade Miami meetup thing, that really showed me that a lot of people out there that are actually building businesses on a blockchain, they're looking for scaling solutions. And a lot of them were brought to Solana, but now building on Solana, they see, okay, well, every few months I'm losing revenue or this or that and the other thing because Solana keeps going down. And I feel like the only reason as of right now that they're not looking at, the obvious choice here, which being Bitcoin, is because of the narratives against us from other chains. And obviously, like you said previously, it just goes back to the fact that why even talk about other chains when you realize that there's only really need for one solution, which is Bitcoin, because Bitcoin solves everything. And if Bitcoin were at the forefront, everything would be by the wayside. So I think eventually, though, more and more businesses, more and more developers coming into the space, trying to build on projects, blockchains like Ethereum or Solana, are going to run into the same ceiling scaling issues for their businesses, where they realize they can't bring their business past a certain point because they themselves are limited by the blockchain that they chose to build upon. And so eventually, I do believe people are going to start being like, okay, well, let's find the solution, and they are going to be led to Bitcoin as that one solution. So I see a positive future for Bitcoin as well. And Hector, first of all, I want to really thank you for answering all of these questions. It was fun pretending to be a noob for a little bit. But as we go to wrap things up here, is there any one question that you feel I should have asked you but didn't? And if there is, how might you have answered?
Let's see. I think overall we covered a good job for like the very new person who's trying to understand Bitcoin and what it is to get into Bitcoin. And so I think we didn't really miss anything. I just would probably say that speculation is fun and it's great, and in crypto in general, it's providing people a great opportunity to possibly make money. So does a lottery ticket, right? And so this idea that crypto is going to revolutionize the world, and still hasn't really provided any real world value, just speaks to the fact that this is a speculative market. And if you're really looking for something that has the highest potential for creating real world value, then you must use a scalable blockchain, and that scalable blockchain is only available today on Bitcoin SV. And so if that's really what you're trying to find, then I would suggest these people, I guess after this video, learn more about Bitcoin SV, find people who are very into the space, and even get involved in trying to build things themselves. Bitcoin SV is not crypto. It's a solution for people to build companies and value with a blockchain, right? If that's what you believe is going to be the future, then get into Bitcoin SV. And so that's why I think it's a very good thing. We should make a distinction and say Bitcoin SV is a tool, not so much a get rich quick scheme, right? So I think that's probably the best advice you could give new people who are learning about Bitcoin and crypto and finding their way through.
Do you have any research materials that you might suggest to somebody new?
I think first of all, like the very obvious basis thing is to, and it's kind of cliche at this point, but read the white paper, right? Read the white paper just to get an understanding what started it all, right? Like this white paper from, people believe, a random person started off this whole revolution, right? And it's kind of ironic and funny that people believe that this guy, who, you know, a lot of us believe is Craig Wright, Satoshi Nakamoto, put this paper out in the middle of a financial crisis because his goal was to overthrow banks, which is kind of ironic, which is kind of funny to think that this guy was just waiting in the shadows until a crisis eventually happened for him to be able to deploy his solution, right? I think to me it was more so coincidental that he came out with a solution around the time that there was a newspaper article that talked about a bailout for banks, right? That to me seems more plausible than this guy waiting years, possibly, for the right opportunity to be like, yeah, now I'm ready for my solution to be released. So read the white paper, get understanding, get a general, like, you don't have to, like, you know, I've read the white paper probably like 10, 20 times at this point, because every time I read it, there's just a little nuance that I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so you'll read it, read it over, and then compare that stuff with what else is happening. Like, go buy a little bit of Ethereum and then find out you're going to pay $10 to send $10, right? And be like, okay, this doesn't work. And then go try Lightning and go figure out, how everything works and how everything breaks. Like, trial by error is going to be your best educator, right? And so just don't mortgage your house, and don't leverage yourself to think that these things are going to make you rich, because it's 13 years in, right? A lot of that has happened and people have made money, but you're now buying into the stories that these are get rich quick schemes. When people were buying them, they weren't that idea. No one believed that. No one thought that, right? And so they took a leap, and they are effectively transacting that value out and getting yachts, getting cars, getting whatever they want, right? And so I think it's best for people who are new, take a cautious approach and understand what they're getting into, and ask questions, find people who are in these spaces to solve and really bounce ideas back and forth and say, hey, how does this work? What's wrong with that? And people who are willing to help are not going to discredit you and basically write you off and say you're an idiot. They're going to tell you, oh, no, this is why this is so cheap. This is why this is works. This is why this is broken, right? And so, just get into the space, understand, and I think that you'll eventually find out what I believe, which is Bitcoin SV is the way for blockchain to really become a success and a technology that people can really utilize in the future.
That's beautiful, Hector. I love the way that you put things out there so easily. It's so effortless for you. And so I appreciate you coming on, sharing your wealth of knowledge with not just me, but everybody who watches this video in the future. But I think I think that'll about do it today. So
Cool.
with that being said, guys, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and also follow us on Twitter at BrittanyBits.